Yeah. Focus on yourself.
All right, welcome back. We're going to go into some twists. A little introduction to twisting asanas. So just a word of caution about twists. This category of poses, perhaps more than any other pose, can lead to misalignments in the spine or the sacrum. So we just want to be careful to follow some general guidelines with twists. A lot of times when people hurt themselves, they'll hurt themselves because they're doing a combination of a twist and a rounding. So they'll lift up and they'll move their back, and that's when a disc will shift or a vertebra will pinch or come out of place. So for twisting asanas, the number one thing that you want to remember is you always want to have a back bend, which means that your tail is back and your chest is up. That is the case if you're in a standing twist or a seated twist. You always want to have a back bend. You always want to have your chest lifting, nice back bend, nice long neck. The next thing to remember in a twist is you always want to have equal grounding. So whether it's your sits bones or your legs, you want to have equal strength in both legs or both equal weight in both sits bones. Or if you're laying on your back, you want to have your hips equal. And so that's why also we worked on that hip hitching a little as well. You want to have the ability to keep your hips level in a twist so that when you turn, you're turning your thoracic spine. You're not twisting. This is the way most people twist. They shift their pelvis. So they'll pop their pelvis out. My pelvis will turn, but my upper back's not going to turn that much. Whereas if I'm twisting with equal hips, my spine turns. But if I'm twisting by just blowing up my pelvis, my sacroiliac joint just pops out. Okay, so I'm right here, but I'm not really twisting. Now I'm twisting. Okay, so level hips are important in a twist. Equal grounding is important in a twist. That back bend is important in a twist. The back bend means lift your chest up, not your chin. So as soon as your chin pops up or out, the twist is over because you've rounded your back, you've kinked your neck, and you're going to strain your neck and mostly turn your cervical spine. The majority of the twist we want to happen in our thoracic spine. That's bound by the rib cage. So your thoracic spine doesn't have too much range of motion. It can forward bend a little bit. It can back bend a little bit, 2 to 3 degrees each vertebra. It cannot move laterally because the rib cage and the facets, the spinous processes lock the spine from going sideways, but it can twist quite a bit. So your thoracic spine can really twist quite a bit. But to get the twist up into your thoracic spine, we have to do all those things we talked about with the equal grounding, the equal hips, and the back bend. Then your chest can really turn. Why do we want to twist? Because the thoracic spine needs movement as well. And so when you're at home and you take a face cloth and you're full of water and you squeeze it out, you twist it. What happens to the length of that face cloth? It shortens, right? It compresses in. You're twisting it. Same thing with your spine. When you turn, your spine squeezes the intervertebral discs a little bit. And then when you take the twist out, the intervertebral discs expand and the blood floods back into the area and the intervertebral discs absorb the hydration and nutrients from the surrounding tissue. So up until about age 25, you have a blood supply going to the intervertebral discs in your back. After 25, that blood supply recedes. And one of the only ways that the intervertebral discs get nourishment is through compression and expansion and absorbing hydration and nutrients from the surrounding tissue. If you have an intervertebral disc that's constantly being pinched or cramped, it kind of gets herniated and emaciated, and it gets compressed. It's no longer plumped up. So we have to bring space to it. We have to bring openness to it and be consistent and build the muscles around it to keep that space so that the disc can re-expand and become reanimated and become a nice shock absorber, a nice cushion between the vertebrae like it's supposed to. So twist, when we're a seated twist, for example, the most basic one is Ardha Matsyendrasana, or half Lord of the Fishes. And the most basic way to do that is with one leg extended straight and one foot on the inside. And this is probably the way that most of us should do it anyway, because it allows for the best twist. but we want to keep our hips level. What will happen, see if you can see what happens. I'm going to do what most people do when they go into the twist. And I'll just do it in the most basic way. So I don't know if you can see it, but my right hip is up. I'm lifting up. So I'm twisting by popping my left hip forward and crunching up my right rib cage. So I'm not really twisting. I'm kind of doing this. Do you understand? This is happening for a lot of reasons. So you're forcing, you're leading with your head, trying to get somewhere else. If you start the head in a twist, again, the heart will shut down. It's just like a back bend. If you try to force the chest up with the chin and a back bend, the heart says, forget it, go without me. The heart is the feminine element. The head is the masculine element. If the masculine tries to force the feminine says, forget it, go without me, have a good time. And so then the head goes, I have to do everything. I have to do everything by myself. And there's a war between the masculine and the feminine. Having a marriage, let the heart uplift the head, let the head inspire the heart, and then you turn. Don't turn the head first. If the head turns first, that's force. If you turn your core, that's power. It's much more powerful to use the core to turn the periphery than to try to turn the core with the periphery. And that includes in a lot of poses. Trying to use the periphery to force the core to turn. The core is going to shut down. It's going to say, forget it, go without me. Power is getting the core involved and using the core to turn the periphery instead of using the periphery to try and force the core to turn. Okay? It's another big difference. Living and surviving, power and force. Two very different ways to live. Power works with things. It makes everything an ally. It works with whatever is here. Force makes constant enemies. It requires friction. It requires something to push against, to define itself in opposition to. Okay, so we don't want to force our practice and we don't want to force our twists. So in Ardha Matsyendrasana, for example, we find a back bend first. So we have to take the roundness out. So we isometrically draw the shin towards us. We bring our tail back and we lift our chest up and we find our back bend. We bring our shoulder blades on your back. So if you want to do that, go ahead and extend your left leg forward. Put your right foot inside of your left knee. And then pull your left hip away from your left heel. So your hips are level and equal. Good. Now, what do you think is the biggest obstacle to putting your foot in this most basic, easiest of twists? What do you think is the biggest obstacle to putting your foot inside instead of outside and bending this knee? What's the biggest obstacle to doing that?
Your right hip has to stay. I feel like if I'm like this, I can kind of turn, but when I'm like this, my hips.
Yeah. So that's physically, but I'm talking about physically, mentally, emotionally. What's the biggest obstacle to what's the biggest obstacle if we know we need to do this, right? But we end up doing this. Why is that simple pose so hard to do? What makes that simple pose so hard to do, even though it might be easier?
You want to go like all the way and crank yourself all the way around to like crack your back or something.
Yes, and then why you would crank that all the way around is it's a trick question, is my answer. It starts with an E, it ends with an O, and it has a G in the middle. So this is too easy for me. I don't want to do this. I want to do the most advanced version of the pose. I don't want to do this. I want to do this. Because that person's doing that. I should be able to do it. I've been practicing yoga for years, so I'm going to do this. Okay? So it's the ego. The ego will compare. It'll look around. It'll say, that person's doing that. I want to do that. Or I see Iyengar doing downward dog with his forehead on the mat. I need to do downward dog with my forehead on the mat. Never mind that Iyengar is a freak of nature, and he's probably one in the 1% of people who should do that. Okay, so we have this idea that harder is better or more advanced is better, and if we don't put a check on that, yoga just starts to become a race towards hypermobility. It just starts to become a race towards overflexibility and hypermobility and overstretching ligaments and destabilizing joints. And if you keep doing that year after year, it's not going to serve you very well. We want to make ourselves stronger, calmer, more integrated, more present. We're not trying to accomplish something. We're trying to recognize something. Do you understand? It's a big difference. You're discovering something. You're not trying to earn something. You're not trying to get your orange belt and then your red belt and your brown belt in yoga, you're discovering something, you're realizing something, you're remembering something. And when you do that, then all of this just becomes a lot easier to do. And so when we move, we turn the core first, and then we integrate the head, and then we turn the head last. So let's face our left foot, extend your left leg, interlace your fingers around your shin, isometrically draw the shin towards you, and bring your tailbone back. That will lift your chest up. Also use your rhomboids to bring your shoulder blades together and relax your shoulders down away from your ears. Now in this position, just gently hit your left hip away from your left heel, and your hips will be nice and square and stable. And you want to feel your lower belly on your upper thigh. That means you're doing a nice back bend. Now, see if you can stay here, but reach your left arm forward. Maybe put the crook of the elbow around the shin. You might have to bring your heel a little closer to your seat to do that. But we want to keep the belly and the thigh and the back bend, lifting the chest up. Now, here's the hard part. Some of you already started to do it. You started to turn to the right, your head, right? So keep looking straight forward at your left foot. Pull your left hip back away from your left heel. Look at your left foot. Take your right palm to your rib cage. Make sure both your sits bones were down. So I'm going to come by, I'm going to put a $100 bill, crisp $100 bill under each one of your right sits bones. And if I can pull it out, I get to have it. If you can pin it down, you can keep it. All right. So take a nice deep inhale, look straight forward, right palm on your rib cage. Exhale, turn your back bend rib cage to the right while you look at your left foot. Notice some of you started to turn your head, right? Inhale, lift your chest up. Exhale, look at your left foot, turn your back bend right rib cage back. Look at your left foot though. Some of you started to turn your head. Yep, look straight forward. Yes. Very good, Magdalena. One more time. Inhale, right sits bone down, lift up, keep looking at your left foot, turn your back bend rib cage to the right. Now, start to turn your shoulders, your neck, your head, and your eyes. Reach your right hand back. Put your fingertips on the floor there behind you. Turn the inside of your right elbow towards your fingers. The inside of your right elbow towards your fingers, and then look over your right shoulder, but keep your chin in. And then pull your left hip one more time away from your left heel and lift your heart for 3. Beautiful. 2, and then 1. Slowly unturn your chest and unturn your head and release. Good. Let's do the other side. Extend your right leg. Bend your left knee. Put your left foot on the ground. Interlace your fingers around your shin. The first thing we do is find a back bend. Then we ground equally through both sits bones. Hit your right hip back away from your right heel. Lifting your chest up, your shoulder blades are together. We're going to start our turn. But notice the tendency to turn the head and the body, the chest as one big chunk. You can keep your eyes forward. Reach your right arm forward, maybe put the crook of the elbow around your shin. Push your left hip down with your left hand. So your left sits bone is going to ground down. That piriformis is going to release to the floor as you lift up. Looking at the air above your right toes, lifting your chest up. Take a deep inhale, take your left palm to your ribs. Exhale, keep looking at the air above your toes, but turn your back bend rib cage to the left. Inhale, lift up, back bend. Exhale, turn your back bend rib cage to the left, chin level. One more time, back bend. Turn your back bend rib cage to the left, and then turn your shoulders, your neck, your head, and your eyes. Look out of the far corner of your eyes towards the back corner of the room, and breathing in and out through the back of your nose for 5. Make sure your chin isn't lifting for 4. And keep breathing in and out through the back of the nose for 3. For 2. And 1. Slowly unturn your head and release. And extend both your legs forward. Bounce your knees up and down. Take a nice deep inhale and a nice deep exhale. Good. So any questions about Ardha Matsyendrasana? Can you say that? Ardha? Matsyendra. Matsyendra, Lord of the fishes, little fish, Shiva and his wife were talking about heavenly things, and this little fish poked his head above the water and heard some of the conversation and instantly became a god. That's Matsyendra. So Ardha Matsyendrasana, half Lord of the fishes pose. So that pose depends on both sits bones being down. The reason that sits bone wouldn't be down on that bent knee side is because the piriformis, the muscle that links the outside of the hip to the sacrum, is tight. And so it's not a question of grounding it by leaning. This pose actually, this is something that very few people understand until they get more advanced in their practice. It's a letting go of tension. It's a relaxing of that trauma, that tension. The psoas and the iliopsoas and the piriformis are the only two muscles in the body that directly link the spine to the legs. Because of that, they're very closely associated with trauma and intense anxiety. That's not their function. It's 0.001% of their function. They're sometimes, the psoas is sometimes known as the fight or flight muscle, but that's only a very supposed to be a very small portion of your life. Mostly the piriformis and the psoas linking the spine to the legs is supposed to help you to be an upright being, a balanced being, a being of grace, a being of creativity and rhythm. But when it's tight, it's holding on to a past tension, a past trauma. And human beings do that because unlike animals, we don't shake it off. We kind of hold on to it and repeat it unless we become a little bit more conscious about it. So to release this down, this past tension, it's actually not trying harder. It's actually trusting, letting go, grounding, lifting up. And then not turning the head, not forcing, not pushing, not leading with the periphery, but turning the core, and then turning the periphery. It changes how you do things outside of your practice. If you can move more powerfully from your core in your practice, it means you're not going to be so externally motivated when you're outside this room. You're going to be able to follow your heart. You're going to be able to listen to what you need to do, which sometimes may not be what other people want you to do, or what they think you should do, or what your fear wants you to do. Okay? Another twist, there's many twists. Another twist is Parivrtta Parsvakonasana. And this is actually a pose that I haven't taught in a long time because people do it so inaccurately that it's hard to help them in a class setting. It's more like a workshop setting. But Parivrtta means, vritti means to turn or whirl. So you guys went over the first 4 sutras of the Yoga Sutra, right? And so vritti, did you go over what the word vritti means? What does it mean? What? Yeah. Vritti literally means storm. It means spinning, whirling, turning. And in this pose, Parivrtta, there's the vritti. So it's a turning, it's a revolving, turning, twisting pose. So in this pose, Parivrtta Parsvakonasana, twisting side flank pose, what happens most often, we'll do the other side, is that hip blows out. And then people turn like this. And again, it's not much of a twist, it's an uneven pelvis. And then you add torque to that with the elbows. And that's what destabilizes sacrums over time. And it causes hip joint problems over time because you're really out of alignment, and then you're applying torque to that alignment with your arms and your upper body. So if you're going to do something like that, you really want to have your hips level. You want to just be able to do even a lunge with your hips level first and be able to find a back bend in your lunge, not a forward bend, before you even consider doing that. So you'll probably have to put your knee down, get your hips level, lift your chest up, and then just putting your hand down, pushing your left hip down and turning your chest, and then turning your neck, your head, and your eyes. What's the biggest obstacle to doing that? It starts with an E, it ends with an O, and it has a G in the middle. So, well, other people are doing, my friend goes to a class and they play music, and sometimes you can hear the instructor saying, go into this pose, and then you want to do what other people are doing. Your ego wants to do better than what other people are doing, okay? Or worse. The ego doesn't care. The ego likes the throne, the ego likes the gutter. Sometimes it goes from the gutter to the throne and back again several times within 1 minute. So in any twist, you want to keep your hips level. You want to get that levelness in your hips. Even when you're laying on your back, and you're going to bring your knees over to the other side. When you go over here, my bottom rib cage is going to be naturally shorter than my upper rib cage. So I want to gently hitch my shorter rib cage longer, and my longer rib cage, make it shorter. So I'd pull my upper hip to my ear in this case to just level my knees a little bit. But it's most important for me to keep my left shoulder blade on the back because I'm working my thoracic spine. So I'll keep my shoulder blades fully on the ground to get the twist in my upper back. And then I do whatever I need to do with my legs to increase the feeling of that twist, but I have my heart getting a nice opening. Okay, so what I'd like to do is have you each practice Ardha Matsyendrasana with each other. So find a partner, and I'd like you to have them extend, do one leg at a time, do just the straight, most basic version of the pose. And what I'd want you to do is to run them through just these basic cues. So here's the basic cues. Do you know what I mean? Pull that hip back. Do you understand what I mean? You hitch that leg into the hip socket. Okay, so you're not extending it. You're not doing your twist just by popping your pelvis out, right? So you're getting your hip into the hip joint, so your chest has to actually turn instead of just popping your pelvis open. All right, so that's the first cue. Then we have to find our back bend, right? So we isometrically draw in and we lift up, and my rib cage is touching my thigh. So I'm actually finding that back bend. My belly's on my thigh. This was like when we were leaning forward, my rib cage was on my thigh, right? I'm finding a back bend in my forward bend. Okay. Then you have to watch that head, because 9 times out of 10 people will go like this. Oh no, look at the front, look at the front. It's like the head wants to go. The eyes will still be trying to look forward, but the head's trying to go over here. And it's just a habit. So you keep looking forward, but turn the core. You're turning up and up and up. And then after you've turned, you start to turn the shoulders, the neck, the head, and the eyes. And then you can even look out of the far corner of the eyes, but then you're making sure you see what happens when the chin pops forward. I lose my chest and my heart, my spine rounds. So you don't lift the chin up and you don't pop the chin out. So we have to keep that chin in. This sets the atlas axis relationship like 2 spoons, one on top of each other. Don't slide one of the top spoon forward. That puts you into fear mode, into fight or flight. Keep the spoons right on top of each other and turn the spoons like that so they're right in the center. Okay? So find a partner, do right and left, both sides with each other, and just run through it. Just play with it, finding the back bend in your twist. Head turns last. See, you can work with these two. Yep, just find, it doesn't matter who you get, just find one partner. Make sure you can see your partner though. Start with your back bend.
But like that's, I know that that's what I mean. Come back to that.
Okay. So this is really early, but go ahead and stand up now because you're still demonstrating it, but like she can't see you, for example. So now you stand up and you take a look so you can see like if a hip is lifted or if a chin is popped out. And they hold for a few breaths and then do the other side. And do both legs. So it's really important to turn the head last and to not have forward head. So if you see the woman in the black tank top, she's turning really nicely. And she let her chest turn before she turned her head. Yeah. The only thing that she might be able to do a little more is to turn the inside of her elbow towards her fingers. But the back bend's imperative. We want to keep the back bend in our twist. So something else that starting off teachers do a lot is they'll demonstrate, but they won't stop demonstrating. So they'll keep demonstrating even if the student can't see them anymore. So you just want to demonstrate initially so they could see it, but then come out of the demonstration so you could see your students and see what they're doing. All right. Any questions on that little introduction to twists? Did you feel it any differently? What did you notice? Can anybody share what they noticed if you noticed something different about either teaching or doing the twist? Yeah, hold on just 1 second. I'll get to you, okay? Go ahead.
I definitely felt like a lot more like pressure being released, like when my hips were even and like my back was actually straight.
So you felt like less pressure,
Yeah.
like less pinching, less pressure in some parts of your body?
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you feel like you were able to lift your chest up a little easier?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. That's exactly what we wanted. What did you notice?
I just realized that I'm more tight than I
Oh,
thought
yeah,
I
yeah.
was because of turning this,
Yeah.
I'm so limber. I turn my head, I can
Right.
do my arm, can go back here, that I was using more this for my turn versus here and how much tighter I am here.
That's
doing it
so
proper.
valuable to know.
Mhm.
Because if you don't know that, you'll just keep using
Right.
your strategies
Right.
to do that. And we do that to protect the heart. It's like, don't open the heart, don't turn the heart. But now, because you notice it, you're starting to be able to feel, which means your heart is opening. So you're going to be able to feel all kinds of different options. That thoracic spine turns. And it's interesting that the heart is there because the heart can see things from a different perspective. The heart can take another person's perspective, can feel compassion, can feel empathy. So it can turn in a different direction. And as you become more and more able to do that, to open up that heart and become more vulnerable, you'll get more integration, but you also have that power because you'll have the back bend and the equal grounding. So yeah, that's very good. It's good that you can feel that, even though it might feel tight and maybe a little discouraging. That was always there, right?
Yeah.
You just didn't know it. So now you know it and you can start to do something about it. That's power. What else? Anybody else notice anything? Yeah, go ahead.
I just feel like when you twist with your heart, it's basically what she said, a lot more efficient than just like flopping back.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And also sometimes twists are at the end of class. So it's like, oh, is Shavasana coming? Is Shavasana coming? Hurry up. Is Shavasana coming? So, but you'll miss it. Like the reason why you came to class might be right in that twist, so you want to be present for it. Did someone else start to say something? Yeah.
Teaching it perspective, it's and this is part of what I'm here for, whatever this ends up evolving to, is how to translate the feeling of it.
Yeah.
In the words is very difficult for me because something feels off, but I don't have the word for it. I can see something, but I don't know how to express it, which usually I don't have a problem with words at all, almost too much so. So that's the challenge for me in teaching it. So when you came in, you did that. I went, yeah, what he said, right? That's the joke. But something felt off, but I didn't know how to translate it.
Yeah. Practice, 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 practice. Yeah. So if you took like a new therapist and someone came to him and you might be sitting there like, right? Because you have a lot of practice, So it's practice, practice, practice. Yeah. So the reason, let me tell you a story. So there was this big dam and it was having a problem with one of its big giant turbines. And they had hired all the best engineers to try and figure it out. And nobody could figure it out. It was making this horrible kind of unbalanced whirring sound at a certain RPM. And so finally there was this old guy who'd been in the business for 4 or 5 decades, had this immense knowledge. And they called him in. He says, well, I'll come in, but it's $25,000 an hour. Well, they're producing power in the hundreds of thousands of dollars a minute. So they called him and they paid him. He came in, he listened, he walked around, and he pulled a big rubber hammer out of his tool belt. He went to a certain spot on an access panel and he went, bam! And then the thing went, and it hummed like a baby. And he went to get payment. And they said, well, you want $25,000 for hitting it one time with your hammer? He said, no, I want $25,000 for the 40 years of experience that told me where and when to hit the hammer. And so it just takes time. It just takes practice. And the best way is to do your practice. As a teacher, keep practicing, because that's how you're going to know how to help others. If you don't know that you're doing this, you're not going to see that in other people, and you're not going to be able to help it. But if you start to become aware that like you're tight in your twist, then you're going to become aware of how to fix it. And then you're going to know how to help other people who are doing that. So your difficulties and your limitations are actually your best gift as a teacher, because as you start to move with them and heal them and transcend them, you're going to be able to help others who are doing it. And there's a lot of other people who are doing what we do or what we used to do. And that way you're helping, you're literally helping. It's like you're helping another self. Everyone that comes to you is just like another aspect of you. So you're just reminding other people what they already know, and you're helping another aspect of yourself to heal yourself. It's kind of funny. Any other questions or observations about the twist before we go on? So little brief introduction of theme. So if you get a piece of paper out, this is just going to take a few minutes. And write down, you're not going to have to share this with anybody. Write down, what is the most challenging or significant thing that you're facing recently in your life? What is the biggest challenge you're facing? Like for me, I would put, my father's in hospice. He's had a really difficult last 2 years, more than 2 years. And it's just something that I'm dealing with daily, taking care of him. My sister and I trying to get him taken care of. He wants to remain independent, but he's not really independent anymore. What's your biggest thing that's occupying the most of your attention now, or feels like most difficult? Maybe you have an illness or an injury or a life change. Just write down what that is. Once you have that, underneath that, draw a line. And underneath this line, I want you to pretend for a moment. So close your eyes and take a breath and just be with this event, this situation. I'd like you to take just an imaginary journey with me. Become yourself 5 years from now. And as this self 5 years from now, you're looking back on this event. You're looking back on this experience. And you're talking to a friend or a family member. And you're saying to this friend or this family member, oh yes, that was when I was learning about blank. Go ahead and write down what that is. 5 years from now, you're looking back at this event and you're writing, oh yeah, that's when I was learning about, or that's when I was discovering, or that's when I was realizing, and then just put down what comes to you. We are all so much more similar than we are dissimilar. We all want to love and to be loved. Just sometimes we have strange ways of showing that. So when you connect at the deepest level with what you're going through as a human being, you're going to be able to connect with the students that come to your class. So much so that they're going to come to you and say, that's exactly what I needed. You can't call everybody up who's might come to your class and say, what are you working on? What are you working on? What do you need to work on? But what you can do is open your heart and find what you're truly working with and what your learning path is. And if you fully dive into that, you're going to dive so deep that you're going to connect with everybody else, because we're all Arjuna. We're all going through the same things in life. We're all experiencing the same limitations, the same fears, the same doubts on the deepest level. So when you connect at the deepest level with what you're going through, you're going to be able to help others who are going through the same thing, as if you were talking directly to their heart. So you have this thing that you're learning. You have the seed of the theme of your class. Why have a theme for your class? Because it gives a dharana, it gives a focus. Dharana, the sixth limb of yoga, which comes from the same root, dri, D-H-R-I, that dharma comes from. Both vocabulary words, by the way. So dharana and dharma both come from dri, which means that which uplifts or upholds. So your dharma uplifts and upholds all creation. Your focus uplifts and upholds all creation. In other words, what you put your attention on with feeling becomes real in the brain and the body. So those two words are related. They're related with each other, and you need focus to do your dharma. And your dharma inspires more focus. So when you have a focus in class, it has all kinds of benefits. People come out of worry, they come out of fear. They focus on one point, they focus on your theme, they focus on their breath, they focus on the pose they're in. And in doing that, they start to heal their life. Because if you're focusing on those things, you're not focusing on what's wrong with you, you're not focusing on your problem, you're not focusing on what's wrong with the world. When you take your attention off of something, it begins to wither, begins to fall away. And what you put your attention on starts to grow like a flower growing into sunlight. Your attention is sunlight that grows whatever it lands on. You don't have to battle what you don't want. You don't have to fight what you don't want. You just start putting your attention on what you want. And as a teacher, when you have a theme, you help people to focus on something that is interesting to you. Therefore, you'll teach it with passion and it'll be important to them. So with this thing that you're learning, now you start to develop support. Maybe there's something you read in the Yoga Sutra. Maybe there's a Bible verse. Maybe there's a movie you saw. Maybe there's a joke you know about. Maybe there's a sacred story. You start to collect all of those things. Then maybe, oh, there's a song about this. You start to develop a playlist. You start to put down some songs or music that supports this. You know what would be a good pose? What's a good pose where I could feel that teaching? I think that dancer pose would be a great pose to do that. And so that becomes your target pose and you build towards your target pose. And then you go away from your target pose. You have this target pose that's like the center tent post of your class. And all of a sudden you have this wonderful structure for your class that you don't have to, even if you get lost, all you have to do is remember your theme, remember what your focus is, and you start to make your focus stronger as you help the students in your class to focus. That's why we want a theme. Very few teachers do it. And you don't even have to overtly state your theme, but if you have it in your heart and your mind when you're teaching your class, you're going to have that center post. You're going to have that focal point for your class, and people are going to be able to leave their problems behind, at least for just an hour, and be able to direct their attention consciously, which is the most powerful thing that a human being can do, to meditate, to direct your attention intentionally. All right. We have a couple other classes, at least one other class on themes, so we'll dive deeper into it. But I did want to touch on that for you. So you can start to build on that. When you guys are going to have to do some sequences together and some practice classes together. So this is a nice way to start to organize your classes. And when you teach it, it'll come from a place of passion and interest and inspiration, and it'll be easier to teach and more fun too. Thank you all so much for allowing me to teach. It was really nice to meet all of you. I look forward to working with you the whole time. Namaste. Have a good night.